Hi, I'm Katie Miranda. Welcome to the Palestine Solidarity Telesummit. Today I'm here with Nabeel Alraee from the Jenin Freedom Theater. He is the artistic director of the Jenin Freedom Theater. And we are doing our interview today without video because Nabeel's connection over in Jenin is a little bit weak and we want to make sure that the sound quality is good. So Nabeel, I am a huge fan of the Freedom Theater. I saw Giuliano's film Armless Children back in 2006 and it inspired me to start teaching art to kids in Hebron where I was living at the time. And I think I've always thought it's amazing that you keep this like arts and cultural scene going on while you're under siege. I was wondering if you could tell us sort of a brief history of the Freedom Theater, and you guys had to overcome this huge tragedy when Giuliano was murdered, and how did you continue on after that?
Well, basically, the Freedom Theater has a long history, and I can start from, I would say, the first Intifada, the first uprising of the Palestinian people. And that goes back to 1987 when a Jewish woman, her name is Arna Mer Khamis, she was married to a Palestinian man from Nazareth. She came to Jenin area, Jenin refugee camp, and started by herself an initiative to teach kids different kind of alternative education. And that's because most of the schools were closed because of different reasons, mainly because of the occupation, and second, because, different strikes was happening. So there was no schools. So she used art in the first place to teach these kids drawing, theater, and all different kind of arts just to fulfill their time and to give them tools to learn. This woman, in my eyes and many people, she was a and what does a Jewish woman has to do with us coming here to that area, and what was her agenda? But after a while, when people watched her and observed her, uh, they find that her work was very precious. So basically, one woman opened the house for her house, and said, please come in and work in my house. And this turned to be an amazing movement, especially with women. Like women joined to join Arna and that woman who received Arna in the first place. And it turned to be an amazing movement growing day after day. Of course, it was, a women movement. Then absolutely man followed because man couldn't leave women alone. And this example started in Jenin refugee camp and then started to split around to be in the city and the villages around, and it grows to be an amazing example of showing the alternative education for children in different places. Until the time where Anna and her partner, that woman, won the Alternative Nobel Prize. And that's considered to be, the prize from Sweden. It's considered to be the Alternative Nobel Prize from Sweden. And I would say it's like up to $50,000. So the main question came to their mind, what can we do with this money? And the first answer was, we can build a theater. But in order for them to build a theater in that place, they need the land, they need to buy a land, they need to have a lot of money to do that. So the same family, the same woman who received Anna in the first place said, you can build a theater above our house, in the roof. Above the roof, in the middle of that camp, Jenin refugee camp. And actually, this is what happened. They managed to build a theater. The theater started to work and produce different productions, and they called the theater the Stone Theater. And that was because the first uprising, the first intifada of the Palestinian people was with stones. We fought the Israeli occupation with stones. So the theater was called the Stone Theater. Now, the main trainer in that theater was her son, Giuliano Merchamis, one of three sons. Giuliano was coming as a very famous actor in Israel. He was like a stage theater actor and a film theater actor, very famous, very well known. He used to come to Jenin refugee camp and teach these kids, who established like a group of amazing actors. I mean, you know, starting their, let's say, their dream or profession to be an actors, and they did several productions. After a while, after a lot of work from the people who was together and in that place, the theater was functioning very well until the time where Anna died with cancer. And then the theater functioned for a while and then stopped for different reasons, mainly financial reasons. And then in 2002, when the Prime Minister of Israel decided to invade the whole West Bank and Gaza, the second Intifada started. When, you know, he entered Jerusalem, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and people really was very angry, very upset, and they started the second Intifada. Jenin refugee camp was one of the main targeted places on their agenda. So they decided to come over and invade Jenin refugee camp. At that time, that group of actors who grow up with a dream of being actors, dreamed to be, one of them dreamed to be the Romeo of Jenin refugee camp. And the girls dreamed to be Joliet. They lost hope because the whole area was closed, and they were actually locked in 1 square kilometer in Jenin refugee camp. Imagine 17,000 people living in 1 square kilometer. Most of these guys became freedom fighters, and they joined the armed resistance. And in 2002, when the Israelis invaded Jenin refugee camp, crucially, and they destroyed most of it. I'm talking here about the third well-sophisticated army in the whole world. 1,000 soldiers, 200 tanks, Apaches, F-16s, all you can imagine surrounding these people in that small area and invading that area. So these guys actually joined the armed resistance, but most of them got killed. Giuliano heard about that, and then he decided to come back, and with his camera, followed these people and actually documented everything at that time. And he made a film called Armless Children.
And you can watch that on YouTube for free.
Yes.
It's available on YouTube.
Or if you want to help the Freedom Theater, you can buy it through our website.
Even better.
Actually, when Giuliano produced this film, it was the main first film that shows the people about why people in Palestine joined the armed resistance. Because we are always accused, with this one phase or one side of the story of just fighting for nothing. But there is a story behind every individual. So it was the first film to show the Palestinian resistance in a very good way, I would say. It's a very, very important film. I would advise people to see it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best documentaries about Palestine that I've ever seen.
Now, because we believe in the cultural role and because we believe in art, uh, definitely the Freedom Theater was open. And because Giuliano mainly believed in that role, the story was like that. When he came and shot the film, one of his students, who was, I think, the only and maybe the second survivor of that group, he became the leader of the armed resistance. He met with other guy, and they talked about the role and the important role of culture, because that students who grow up to be the leader of the armed resistance said a, a gun without a culture is an enemy gun. It doesn't explain who we are. It will kill us. It will kill us in the first place. So they decided to bring back the theater, and Giuliano came back 2 weeks after. Like I'm talking here about 2005, after the release of the film Armless Children, and they started to work to open the Freedom Theater. In 2006, they find a place. It was mainly a building without columns. It's an empty space, and I would say it's one of the rare places where you can find an empty space, because in Palestine, whenever you build like a high building, we have always to put like columns inside. I don't know why, but I think it's like that. So it's from the time of the British Mandate, and then when the United Nations established a very unique program for the Palestinian people on Arwa, to provide refugees with the supplies, oil, sugar, and food. They were using that place, but then with time they abandoned that place. It was full of garbage, um, and they found that place. They cleaned it up, and turned to be the theater. So the second question came to their mind: what we need to call that place? So they called it the Freedom Theater. And what we are longing for is freedom as Palestinians. So that's why they called it the Freedom Theater. The Freedom Theater opened its doors in 2006. And from that, we started to work.
Can you tell us a little bit about the concept of cultural resistance and why is that so important?
Okay.
And how has it helped the Palestinian struggle?
I mean, um, let's start with a society without a culture doesn't have an identity. A culture can show the identity of any society. And a culture can provide you with different tools to communicate, talk, and meet, right?
Right.
So if we are talking about Palestinian people, it's a society, it's a community, it's people, have history, long history, and they existed in this land long time ago. Of course, with different race, different religious backgrounds. We were living in Palestine, Christians, Muslims, and Jews for thousands and thousands of years. We were never divided. We have our own culture, and every small society and every small race has its own culture, and everything was respected until the time of Zionism, where Zionism had a different plan. Is and that plan is to dismiss every different race from that matrix. Now, the importance of the role of providing people with the word culture or cultural resistance, and as we call it now, culture of resistance, because we need to investigate that term. We thought that culture will include art and all different forms of daily habits that will present a community, because we have been seen through the eye of the world, through Zionism, because this is how the media presented us for the last, 70 years, as terrorists, even people with tails.
Tails?
Yes,
What do you
Yes,
mean tails?
tails. I mean, it looks like we are not human beings. We are animals. We
Oh,
just
I
existed
see.
there. We
Okay.
can, we can basically be killed or died because we are not important.
Right, right,
And
right.
I'm going here to the extreme because I wanted to provide people with an image. When media literally trying to present people in a different image, they can do that if
Yeah, you're
they
right. You're
really
right.
change the narrative, change the story, and present what people want to see, so everything can change. Um, so that's why we believe it's the time to go back to the theater and culture and try to investigate this term, and also put the word resistance, because we are resisting, and to resist is to exist, basically. And we are existing here to try to communicate with people through our own story. My own belief, and I believe the Freedom Theater is also believing in this. We are a story as a human being, remain to be told, or it's being told already. So culture is an amazing communication. Um, Culture is uh, the best way to meet people through. Difference is not necessarily bad. It's also a beautiful phase of meeting each other as human beings. That's why we believed in the role of culture and this term cultural resistance, because we are resisting through culture. Now, a main definition of cultural resistance doesn't really exist, because you can include so many different sides of the story. So this term, because we believe in the role of culture and in the role of art.
And why is art and culture so important for people under siege? People who, maybe their immediate needs might be food and shelter, but it's still so important for them to have this art
I
and
think
creative
art isn't.
outlets.
I believe food and shelter can exist, but if your mind is not working, you can't find way to find your food and your shelter. And art is an amazing way of investigating, researching, and making people think about the needs and what they need to do, and why, and when, and where, and all these questions. That's why I believe we didn't exist only to eat and sleep. We existed to think, to share what we have with each other as human beings. So culture is an amazing way of putting us in question, in questioning life and reality. That's why I believe the culture is very important. Besides, also historically, I believe every revolution that happens around over the world was was supported with art and culture all the time, and this was a key point of a success of any revolution.
So, Nabil, what do you think about Palestinian resistance in general that is working and what is not working? And you can go outside the scope of cultural resistance if you want.
Right now, you know, more than 70 years of struggle, because Palestine was under occupation for before the Israeli occupation started, even before that. We were under the Ottoman occupation, and then the British, and then the Israelis, right?
Right.
So, so I believe without going to this heroic part of the story, Palestinian resistance existed for a long time, trying to fight for people to exist and to have their basic rights. Now, not all the time the Palestinian resistance was right. Not all the time the Palestinian resistance was wrong. I always advocate for a time where the Palestinian people need to stop, step back and evaluate the Palestinian liberation project. We needed to do that all the time. We needed to think about why we are fighting, what we are fighting. And the most difficult part now, you are not fighting one occupation. It's more than that. It's layers and layers of occupation. Starting, of course, from the Israeli occupation, going down to our own authority occupation, and then down to the society occupation, and if you want, down to the NGOs occupation, down to the self occupation, to the mind occupation. If we, need to go through all of that. So the Palestinians started, fighting through everything possible on their hand. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I'm saying just the whole project. And look, I believe that's why we need culture. That's why we need education in the first place. And then everything can be possible. That's why if we think of only marching from the north to the south, we will be much more effective than holding a gun. But that doesn't mean I exclude people from having the right to fight back with whatever they have, this crucial occupation.
So, Nabeel, can you tell us about your upcoming European tour? What's on the agenda for that, and how can people see your shows?
Of course. We are planning to, we just came back from Egypt as part of the Experimental Theater Festival that was done in Egypt. And we presented a play called Return to Palestine. And this play will be toured very, very soon in Sweden, France, and Luxembourg. It will be presented there in several places, different parts in every city. This play is an amazing play. It's an amazing style of theater. Was directed by Micaela Miranda. She's a Portuguese. Was written by and devised by the group of students. I myself built up the story of the play. The play is made 1.5 meter in one, a very small area, 6 actors inside, 2 musicians. It's basically about a Palestinian American who was born in America, grew up in America, and have this romantic idea about Palestine. This guy one day decided to come to see what is going on in Palestine. So when he came, he faced reality and actually changed his mind, because this is not the same idea that he had in mind when he dreamed about coming to Palestine. The play is not that long. It's 45 minutes, but it's very, very nice because it's a mixture of dramatic, comic situation. So and it's very physical one, because the actors actually use their bodies a lot to tell the story. So it's a physical storytelling kind of theater.
And how was it received in Egypt?
It was really amazingly received, because people expected. Okay, let me maybe mention that I faced this all over the world, in the Arab world, or in Europe, or in the US, especially with people who support Palestine and all the time, in solidarity with Palestine. People don't see sometimes the art is presented rather than seeing the Palestinians themselves. So if we clap, they will clap. If we woke, they will clap. And I'm saying, please, see the art we present. Don't look at us as victims, because we don't need to victimize ourselves. It's the situation. We are just presenting the art. So when we went to Egypt, as an example, People expected us to cry on stage, but actually they saw a piece of theater that professionally was done with beautiful music, amazing actors on stage. The piece of art was actually telling the story in from a very human perspective. So actually, they loved it, and all of them they thanked us, and they said it's really a different way of presenting the Palestinian society through this kind of theater.
And I'm really curious, was this story based on like a true story of a Palestinian American?
Well, now let me tell you the story of this. 3 years ago or 4 years ago, we decided to do a project called the Freedom Bus. And the Freedom Bus, the main idea with it is to bring artists from Palestine and outside of Palestine with witnesses from all over the world to join this bus and go directly to the communities where they live under the military occupation directly and join these people in their daily life, work with them, and do an artistic event and hear their stories. We use the way and the style of playback theater, gathering these stories, and these stories, most of them are real. And after we gathered these stories, because we believe in one of the main difficult part of the occupation is that they can actually close the south from the north in 5 minutes. So the people on the north doesn't really know what is happening in the south, and it's, you know, it goes this way. So we took these stories in order for us to travel with them and present them in different places in Palestine. And this is where the main idea of this play came, is just to create a play with these stories. And of course, uh, um, do it in a theatrical forum and make like a storyboard and put it like in a dramatic kind of situation. So this American character, of course, it did exist, not exactly the same way as it was presented in the play, but it was very, very close to the main story. But most of the stories is told in the play. It's very, very true stories.
Nabeel, if there are European listeners out there who are listening to this interview and they want to host you in their city for this upcoming tour, is that still possible for them to do? And if so, how would they do that?
I believe we will be in Sweden. Our tour will start from the 29th of October. We will be in Sweden until the 7th of November. And then from there, we will leave to France and spend most of the time in different cities in France. On the 19th, we will go to Luxembourg, but also back to France. So in this time frame, any proposal is welcome. And if any people wants to contact us, they can contact me directly. I would say at Nabeel, is Nabeel at thefreedomtheater.org, or through Skype. I have Skype. It's al.raee, or on my phone number, or they can basically look the Freedom Theater, and they will find all the contacts there in our website, www.thefreedomtheater.org.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And hopefully there are some European listeners out there who will get in touch with you about that, because I think it's so important. And I wish I will have the opportunity in the future to see a Freedom Theater play. I have not seen one yet.
We would love to go to the US, and hopefully we're planning to do that. So I hope, we can find a way to show it to most of the people who asked about it.
Okay, please get in touch with me if you're going to be on the West Coast, because I have
Absolutely.
contacts here, and hopefully I can help set something like that up for you.
Thank you. Of course. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nabeel. This was really fun,
Thank you.
and best of luck on your tour.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. You too. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.